Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Well, here it is. Thanks to the always awesome Kaliber and the good folk at Avalon Hill Games, I have a review copy of the HeroQuest expansion Jungles of Delthrak. Today I'm going to be reviewing the contents, sharing my thoughts on all the new rules and the quest, keeping it spoiler free as much as possible. Then I'm going to be following up with some additional content in future videos, including one of my deep dives into the first ever branching campaign. Before we get to that, I have an important announcement about an error in this product. Normally, I wouldn't front load a review by drawing attention to an error, but it is really important and I want to make sure nobody misses it. At the end of Quest 6, the rules direct the players to Quest 9, but this should actually read Quest 8. Avalon Hill will be correcting this in future print runs, but if you have a first edition, be aware that if you don't make this correction in your quest book, your heroes are going to wander off in the wrong direction. Enough about that though, we have a jungle to explore. While Jungles of Delthrak is not Avalon Hill's first opportunity to get creative with HeroQuest, pushing new ideas that extend beyond what the original release of the game provided, it is only the second of the 5 large box expansions available at retail that isn't based on existing materials. And that's pretty exciting, because it's a real chance for Avalon Hill to show where HeroQuest could go if it continues to thrive. For this expansion, they employed Levi Coombs of Planet X Games, who has a history in role-playing games, and he has seized the opportunity to lean into HeroQuest's RPG elements, introducing numerous concepts that nudge the edges of the game system's design space. As a result, this does feel fresh and new, a departure from what HeroQuest has always been. As a result, this may be the most divisive expansion of the game to date. Personally, I believe Avalon Hill have been loyal to what HeroQuest is, and they have given us beautiful remakes of all the classics we wanted, except Wizards of Morcar. And while I certainly want and expect Wizards of Morcar, it is time to start moving the adventure into new realms. However, I can absolutely see why some people will look at this expansion as something that isn't true to the game's original spirit. Ultimately, it will be up to each player to decide what side of the fence they stand on, but if you are looking for something for HeroQuest that feels completely new, this expansion is a good place to start. Opening the box, the first thing you are presented with are 2 punch boards containing everything from new enemies and NPCs to hazards and room overlays. We will look at everything individually in a moment, but this is a good point to mention that while these overlays are good, this expansion is the first that really would have benefited from a new board. It's true that some of the quests in Jungles of Delthrak do still take place in regular dungeons, and I know including a whole new board would have added a lot of expense to the product. And yes, it's easy for me to say that wouldn't be an issue when I didn't have to buy it myself. But I think, with our heroes venturing into such a different sort of location, we really needed something more than a few tile overlays to set the scene. Indeed, there are several quest maps where I'm not entirely sure where the heroes are even supposed to be. Is it a part of the jungle, a temple, a tomb? Are some bits inside and some bits outside? This is the first time I have felt the limitations of the HeroQuest board, which has always served brilliantly in representing dungeons, fortresses, castles, caverns, and even city streets. I guess that's what comes from breaking new ground. Beneath the punch boards, we have our quest book. The plot of this campaign is Zargon has been up to no good again, and he has stolen an ancient relic from the dwarves in the Jungles of Delthrak, who just so happen to be refugees from Keller's Keep. Without this relic, the jungle has succumbed to a magical blight that causes outgrowths of dangerous crystals. The heroes have to enter the jungle, find out what has happened, and stop the spread of the dread blight. There are 16 quests in total, but due to a branching quest line, you won't play through them all. You will, though, play through most of them. The quest doesn't branch to the degree I thought it would, and at certain points the quest lines will converge on a quest that you will have to go through no matter what previous choices you made. I can't really give examples without spoilers, so this will all be addressed in a future video, but I think I'm safe in saying that, in total, there will be 6 quests you will see each time you play through the campaign, and 3 points where you can make decisions. In total, you will play 10 quests with 3 possible endings. That is cool and something totally new for HeroQuest, but possibly a little underwhelming in practice. The good thing is, a lot of the quests really do work hard to introduce more role-playing concepts. There are riddles to solve, and special situations that go beyond the standard open door punch monster search format that is at the heart of all HeroQuest games. You will decide how to interact with NPCs, you will miss parts of dungeons if you can't figure out puzzles, and there will be interactions with monsters resulting in surprising effects that will force heroes to think differently about how they deal with each situation. That is all good stuff. Next we have our first tray, which includes the playing cards, the new heroes and animal allies, and some of the enemies. Beneath that we have a second tray containing miniatures, which also has a gap for housing all the tokens after you have punched them. In this video I'm going to cover the heroes quickly, as I do plan on doing separate videos talking about the new hero classes in much more detail. The set includes male and female berserker sculpts, and these are good. While modern HeroQuest miniatures have never stood toe-to-toe with the best board game pieces on the market, I have always been generally pleased with their quality and detail, and these look like they will paint up just fine. I don't think they necessarily present as berserking. They could have been a little more animated perhaps, but I'm not a fan of miniatures that are too dynamic anyway. Berserkers are basically like a fancy version of the Barbarian. They get 3 special abilities that buff their combat prowess, but those abilities either hurt the Berserker or else are only accessible after the Berserker has taken a certain amount of damage. To offset these skills, Berserkers are not allowed to use ranged weapons. You also get male and female Dwarven Explorers. I think these sculpts do a much better job of capturing the essence of the characters. You can see in their poses they are tentatively creeping forwards, perhaps checking for loose flagstones as they explore a dangerous lair. They come with 3 skill cards that are all based around traps and treasure. Additionally, they have the Dwarf's ability to disarm traps without a toolkit. To balance these skills, the Explorers are not allowed to wear metal armour. We also get 2 new animal allies. Animal allies are normally used if your party has less than 4 heroes in it. You just pick 1 or more animal allies, so you have 4 in total. However, there is a way to earn an animal companion in the Jungles of Delthrak quest, which I will discuss another time. The raptor is really well done, but I do have a problem with it having such a long tail when the model is supposed to stand on a single space. Overhang like that can become a problem when the board gets crowded. The raptor is move 8, attack 2 dice, defend 2 dice, 3 body points and 3 mind points. It has a special ability that allows it to split its movement so it can spring forwards, attack, and then run out of range of the monster's retaliation. Suitably thematic. The second animal ally, the Saberfang, is... what can I say? This is a bad sculpt. I can see what they were going for, but it looks like someone in a bad furry costume. This, for me, is the worst sculpt in the box because it just fails to hit exactly what this creature is supposed to be. Stats are move 8 squares, attack 2 dice, defend 3 dice, 5 body points and 1 mind point. It has the special ability to attack diagonally, the same as the Wolf Companion from Against the Ogre Horde. As a side note, now we have 3 animal companions, the Wolf, the Saberfang and the Raptor. I am sure someone is already drafting up some new druid shapeshifting rules. Moving on, we get 17 new monster miniatures. Well, I say new, that's not entirely accurate. You get 2 goblin archers, which we first saw in Against the Ogre Horde. One has a bomb, the other has a boomerang, but they are functionally identical. Unfortunately, there are no official rules for throwing bombs around or having boomerangs return to the attacker if they fail to hit their target. Their stats are move 10 squares, attack with 2 dice against non-adjacent targets or 1 dice against adjacent targets, defend 1 dice, 1 body point and 1 mind point. One thing I do want to point out though, because I thought it was neat, the artwork for the Goblin Archer depicts a goblin with a boomerang, but the artwork for the card in Against the Ogre Horde depicts a goblin with a bomb. The cards are functionally identical, and Avalon Hill could have easily reused the same artwork, but they went the extra mile, which I always appreciate. We also get 2 skeleton archers, which again were previously seen in Against the Ogre Horde. These are some of the weaker sculpts in the box, they just don't quite manage to capture the character shown on the card art. Stats are move 6, 2 attack dice against non-adjacent targets or 1 attack dice against adjacent targets, 2 defend, 1 body point and 0 mind points. These archer variants can be added into any campaign in place of regular goblins and skeletons, and they are a really useful addition for expansions like Keller's Keep or Return of the Witchlord, where the biggest complaint is you are seeing the same enemy types repeatedly. Moving on, we have a new enemy type represented by an old miniature, the Blightweavers. You get 4 of these. The sculpt is a repeat of the Dread Cultists from Rise of the Dreadmoon, only here they are cast in green plastic instead of grey plastic. Nothing particularly special here in terms of the sculpts, they are a bit bland, but they are functional for what they represent. Their stats are Move 7, Attack 2, Defend 2, 1 body point and 2 mind points. They can each cast Channel Dread and Creeping Grasp once per quest, and the cards for those spells are included. Channel Dread is the same spell we saw in Rise of the Dreadmoon, where you roll 1 dice and add 1 to the result for each enemy adjacent to the caster who can also cast this spell. It's a truly scary spell that can bypass armor and drain up to 2 body points, and which is going to encourage heroes to target the Blightweavers first before they have a chance to group up. The second spell is new and has a nice piece of art showcasing the Berserker in action. To use it, you place a Grasping Vine tile under the target hero and they must roll 1 combat dice. If they roll a skull, they suffer 1 body point of damage and cannot move from that square. The target or an adjacent hero can spend their action on their turn to destroy the vines. I think Zargon is going to love this one, I know I do. Not only does it have a decent chance of causing damage, but it restrains the hero and will cost 1 hero their action to remove it. That's a lot of little hurts that stack up and could really break up a party's formation and ruin their plans. All things considered, a pretty nasty spell. Next we have another goblin, a new type. It's a little creepy goblin warlock. What a cute thing. Be aware she does not have a stat card, as this miniature is only used for named villains whose stats are in the quest book. Next up we have 2 raptors. Exactly the same sculpt as the animal ally, but in green rather than red, and with ever so slightly recoloured and recropped artwork on the stat card. These are Move 8, Attack 3, Defend 2, Body 2 and Mind 3. They have the keyword Clever Tactician, and that is something new for this expansion. Enemy keywords that define set abilities. The Clever Tactician ability means the raptors can split their movement to attack, allowing for hit and run tactics. They also roll 1 additional attack dice when targeting a hero adjacent to or diagonal to another enemy. Personally, I think this ability should have been 2 distinct skills. Clever Tactician could have allowed for split movement, while a different ability, Gang Up maybe, could have allowed the extra attack dice. The last of our small enemies, and they ain't that small, are the Skull Blights. And yes, they are cast in white because they are undead foes, and that means they are susceptible to holy water, a rule which is somewhat tucked away in the fluff text at the back of the quest book. There are 3 of these monstrosities in the box, which should be enough to cause your heroes some trouble. Stats are Move 6, Attack 3, Defend 2, Body 2, Mind 0. They have the special rule Entangling Roots. If a hero moves adjacent to these monsters, their movement is immediately ended. This is an exciting development for HeroQuest, as we don't see a lot of abilities that prevent heroes dancing around the monsters, and now Zargon has a way of pinning them in place. I do have to say though, calling the ability Tangling Roots was a mistake, because now, if a different type of monster ever has the same ability in the future, an octopus creature for example, that monster will either have to have a keyword that doesn't make thematic sense, or they will have to have a new keyword for an ability that already exists, and that gets messy. Entangling would have been a good enough keyword in this instance. Next we have the first of the showstoppers, 3 massive beasties which are really exciting additions to Zargon's ranks. First is the Serpent. I think this one is absolutely great, and it has some serious weight to it. It doesn't tower over the heroes like some of the other big enemies we have seen, still nothing compares to the Frozen Horror for terrifying scale, but it is big enough that heroes are going to think twice about getting stuck into it. As with all big monsters that cover 2 spaces, the Serpent can attack all adjacent and diagonally adjacent spaces. That is a rule that should really be covered with a keyword on the stat sheet now that we are going down the keyword route. The Serpent's stats are Move 8, Attack 4, Defend 3, Body 6 and Mind 3. It has the keywords Spawn and Venomous. Spawn I will cover in a moment. Venomous isn't as nasty as it could be. If a hero takes damage from a venomous enemy, they have to roll 1 red dice. On a 5 or 6, they are paralysed. They will still get an action on their turn, but they cannot move. The effect lasts until the end of their next turn. Next is the Blight Crawler. Finally, we get a giant spider for HeroQuest. I always thought every dungeon crawler should have giant spiders, but good grief, I wasn't expecting something this big. What a lovely chunk of plastic. It's really solid and suitably gross. I love it. Or maybe hate it. Stats are movement 7, attack 4 dice, defend 4 dice, 3 body points, 4 mind points. It has the spawn and venomous keywords, the same as the serpent, but also has the ability agile. An agile monster can move through hindering terrain, furniture and heroes as if they weren't there. The final miniature, my absolute favourite, is the giant ape. He's massive, he's got a big stone club, he's wearing a necklace made from a blight crystal, and he's got a bad attitude. I am absolutely certain most players are going to end up nicknaming this big lad Gorilla Grodd, but he doesn't have Grodd's level of intelligence. He's more of a Solomon Grundy. Stats are move 8, attack 4, defend 3, body 7, mind 5, and he has the keyword agile. That's it for new enemies represented by miniatures, but this box also includes 3 types of small enemies called spawnlings. You get 4 cardboard tokens for spiders, serpents and centipedes, and they all have the same stats. Move 3, attack 0, defend 0, body 1, mind 0. They are all venomous and agile. Spawnlings work in conjunction with the spawn ability of enemies such as the serpent. At the end of each hero's turn, a monster with the spawn ability can either create one spawnling of their type or else make a move action with all the spawnlings of their type on the board. If a spawnling enters a space containing a hero, the token is removed from the board and placed on the hero's character card. After a hero ends their turn, they will take 1 body point of damage for each spawnling on their card. The spawnlings can be targeted like normal enemies, even when they are on a hero's card, and heroes who can use area of effect abilities or make multiple attacks are going to be very useful for thinning out their ranks. Overall, this is a really good selection of new enemies. Every single one of them has something special they can do, even if it's just making a ranged attack. And that variety means the heroes are always going to be on their toes, always forced to think carefully about the best way to cut through their enemies efficiently. And we still aren't even done with the plastic. This expansion includes some cool new plastic terrain elements, and for those people who lament that HeroQuest furniture doesn't tend to have any special rules associated with it, some of this new stuff does. You get 2 of these basins in grey plastic. In this form, they represent pools of water. You can move through a pool, but you can't finish your turn on it. If a hero searches for treasure in an area with a pool, they may choose to restore 1 body point instead of drawing from the treasure deck. It doesn't say it in the rules, but I assume the limit of 1 search per hero per room is still in effect in this instance, to prevent heroes from spamming the pools until they are at full health. Now, at times you may need a crystal cluster. For this, you place the translucent crystal sculpt on top of a grey basin. And yes, the crystal bit is hollow, so you can put some lights inside it if you want to. These crystals radiate dread energy, so if a monster casts the Channel Dread spell while adjacent to the crystals, they add 1 to their roll. The crystals block line of sight, and they can be destroyed if you inflict 6 points of damage on them. You can also turn a basin into a bonfire using the fire sculpt. Again, this translucent piece is hollow if you fancy trying to light it from inside. These don't block movement or line of sight, but you can't end your turn on them. However, if you pass through them, you roll a combat dice, and if you roll a skull, you take 1 body point of damage. Fair enough. There is also a statue which blocks line of sight and may have special rules associated with it in some quests. It's got lots of melted candles all over it, so someone has been taking design lessons from Games Workshop. Finally, there is a treasure stockpile. This is effectively a fancy treasure chest and indicates where there is a big haul of stuff for heroes who search. These new terrain elements are just the start of making our beloved HeroQuest board feel like a jungle environment. We also get a selection of hindering terrain tiles. These represent sand, webs or jungle, but the different designs are just for thematic purposes, and from a rules perspective they all do the same thing. The rules state that it costs 2 movement points to traverse hindering terrain. This is indicative of a general minor complaint I have about this expansion. The rules writing feels like it could be tightened up in places. Why use the term traverse? Why not just say it costs 2 movement points to enter a space containing hindering terrain? The reverse of the hindering tiles is a mismatched mess of bits and bobs. some vines, which are used for the grasping vine spell and traps, a weird guardian monster that could have been a miniature, some oversized weapons and room features. And this does bother me. I have complained about this in previous expansions, but I'm going to do it again here anyway. It's a pain when tokens are double-sided, but each side is for a completely different purpose. It makes it more difficult to sort tokens and can lead to situations where you need a token but you are already using the reverse side of it for another purpose. I have always thought that could be handled more thoughtfully. Anyway, some tokens also represent cocoons, which block movement and line of sight but can be destroyed for the cost of an action, and some represent NPCs you may find on your quest. All of these tokens have grasping vines on the reverse. We then get some tokens for tracking which of the heroes are suffering from venom. The reverse of these can be used to show a location where a hero has been incapacitated. Nice tokens overall, well illustrated, and it's clear what they all are. The rest of the punch board is taken up with our new map overlays, which are also all double-sided. It's really a shame, because it means there are some locations that you can never use on the same map, which is fine for the included quests, but a little restricting when you are designing your own missions. Still, the artwork is really nice, and I do appreciate you get quite a lot of tiles to help give the board more of a jungle theme. And I like the tile representing an old shack with a slightly suspicious cauldron in it. We have nearly trawled our way through all the contents. I told you it was a lot, but we still have some cards to look at. There are 4 potions, and I was very pleased to see they are presented as alchemy cards rather than equipment. Alchemy cards were first introduced in Rise of the Dreadmoon, and if you have that expansion, you can just add these new cards to your alchemy deck. I hope that new expansions will continue to use the alchemy deck, as I think it's neater keeping potions separate. In terms of the potions, one is the good old healing potion, which is a reissue with slightly different fluff text. Then we have a potion of serpent's blood, which cures paralysis from venom, Spider Step Elixir, which effectively gives a hero the agile ability, and the awesome Potion of Elder Wisdom, which lets heroes restore one spell or skill they have used. There are 4 new treasure cards to add to your treasure deck, 1 emerald worth 75 gold, 1 dwarven relic worth 50 gold, and then 2 hazards. One that drops a centipede spawning on you, and a screaming idol that forces you to roll a number of dice equal to your mind points, and if you fail to roll at least 1/6, you take 2 body points of damage. I guess these cards add a little bit more theme to your jungle adventures, but honestly, I think they could have been left out and they wouldn't have been missed. The hazards aren't really going to do much to elevate the theme as they will occur so infrequently, and the new treasures are just gold purses that aren't going to heighten the sense you're in an alien jungle environment finding ancient relics. They really needed to be a bit more special. Really, this might have been an expansion where a brand new treasure deck would have been a good idea. The last 5 cards are artifacts. Because they are all linked to specific quests and sometimes even end goals, I'm not going to share them here to avoid any potential spoilers, but I will talk about them all when I do my deep dive into the campaign. And that is it in terms of new components, but really, what more do you want? 2 new hero classes, 2 new allies, 10 types of monsters, 5 new types of plastic terrain, 2 punch boards of tokens and overlays, new spells, treasures, artifacts and potions, plus the branching quest. The quest book even has a section of new and variant rules. Unthreatened movement is now a regular fixture, which I think is a good call. Unthreatened movement means when there are no monsters on the board, heroes move a fixed distance of 4 spaces for each movement dice they would normally roll. This keeps things moving nicely, and I have used that rule since it was first suggested in the online quest Into the Northlands. Multi-phase enemies, first introduced in Against the Ogre Horde, where they were desperately underutilised, also make an appearance and seem to be integrated in a more satisfying manner that should shock the heroes. Variable order of play has also been added to the rule set, allowing heroes to decide each turn what order they should activate in. Most interesting of all, there are now 3 difficulty modes to determine how to handle a hero's death. There is the standard mode, which is exactly the same as normal. Then there is the heroic mode. In this mode, if a hero is reduced to 0 body points, they are incapacitated. On their next turn, they gain a skull token. On the turn after that, they die. This gives the other heroes 2 turns to administer a potional spell to save their friend's life. Finally, there is the story mode, where heroes are incapacitated when reduced to 0 body points, but there is no risk of them dying, and they will regain 1 body point as soon as there are no monsters around. In this mode, all 4 heroes have to be incapacitated for them to die. Additionally, in Heroic and Story mode, spellcasters can now cast a spell to heal themselves when they are reduced to 0 body points, even if they previously used an action on their turn. Personally, I like the Heroic mode. It's very D&D to have a hero knockdown and then to have that ticking clock as they inch closer to death. I think I am going to add that rule, but make it so that it's no longer possible to drink a potion at the point you hit 0 body points. That way another hero has to intervene, giving up their turn to save you, and that's just more interesting. But I really do need to wrap up this video now. So overall, what do I think? I've said before that when I look at these expansions under a microscope like this and I start drilling into every little detail, it can start to feel like I am absolutely dragging them. But the complaints and criticisms come from a place of love, and for the most part, I think this is a really good expansion. It's loaded with content, lots of great new enemies and miniatures, and I like the new hero classes, particularly the Berserker. There are issues, but for the most part they are minor. My biggest complaint is that this expansion doesn't fully embrace the shift in location. A new board, or just a lot more overlays, and archways made of trees and vines to replace regular stone doorways would have gone a long way to giving a more coherent idea of the surroundings. As it is, at times the maps feel almost abstract, and that's something HeroQuest should never be. I also feel like sometimes Avalon Hill can be a little sloppy, for want of a better word. For example, there is inconsistent wording in the rules. Sometimes the term creature is used, and it seems to mean monsters and heroes, but then at other times a phrase will be used such as heroes and other creatures, including monsters, which throws doubt over the original intention behind the use of the word. And then there are other little things like, why isn't there a keyword for big monsters? Why isn't there a keyword for undead monsters? Why are the rules for using holy water on skull blights hidden in fluff text? And why use the word traverse in relation to moving over hindering terrain? But when all is said and done, there is much more here to be commended than condemned. This expansion really shows Avalon Hill putting their own stamp on the game, being bold and brave and taking the system in new directions. This is a strong indication that they aren't going to sit back on previous successes. HeroQuest is moving forwards. We are delving into new regions and facing new foes. We are really going on an adventure together. And that is, of course, what HeroQuest has always been about. But that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.